Testimonial is liberation theology in the Latin American context. I start by noting the death of Gustavo Gutierrez, October 22nd at age 96. Father Gutierrez had first begun as a medical student in his native Peru. He was then ordained as a priest. He served in a neighborhood of extreme poverty from which he became aware that, quoting him, "Poverty is not a fate, it is an injustice." Gustavo Gutierrez was by no means the only person associated with liberation theology in the Latin American context. There are dozens of names, Catholics and Protestant, but he articulated it in his famous book, A Theology of Liberation. So, in honor and in memory of Father Gutierrez, we say, presente. Liberation theology is a deep, fascinating, controversial subject, and I feel it's been chasing me all of my life. Most of you know I was formed my faith was formed in the Catholic Church. As a kid, I remember the enthusiasm and excitement of Vatican II. I've traveled a lot in Latin America, both as a journalist and in church work. And if I'm not careful, I can go very deep into this subject, which would not work at all for a tiny testimonial. So I'm going to follow Pastor Lee's advice, which is something I do anyway, and concentrate on one idea. If you know just one thing about liberation theology in the Latin American context, it is probably this: the preferential option for the poor. Or, ditching the academic language, God is on the side of the poor. However, when Dr. Jorge Rodriguez joined us in July, he said something remarkable. What was considered most dangerous about liberation theology by the oppressive dictatorships in Latin America and by their allies in the United States, in corporate boardrooms, including in the White House and the halls of Congress, was not belief and not principle, but methodology. Now, at its simplest, that methodology was 3 words: see, judge, act. First, see injustice and oppression through the eyes of those who are suffering most. Next, judge in the lens of the Scripture and with curious suspicion what systems are causing that injustice, and this is important, to whose benefit. And finally, to act, to bring justice. So why would the powerful so fear methodology? And they definitely feared it. Thousands of people died just in El Salvador alone in the 1980s. Well, it's a question I've been thinking about, and I think that see, judge, act is a methodology that is very portable and very adaptable to any example and to any context of injustice. And this method could be and was practiced not just by the priests and the nuns and the Protestant pastors, but by ordinary people through what were at that time called base communities. So perhaps we can learn from a practice and a context that is now 30, 40, 50 years old. See, judge, act. Now, we have an election coming up in 2 days. I know you've heard about that. And there is understandably a lot of anxiety. We all feel it, and we all feel it for different reasons and in different ways. Depending on what happens, much could change, or maybe very little will change. But what I am confident will not change is my role, and your role, our role, of showing up in the world as disciples of Jesus. So how do we do that? How do we live in a time such as this? Well, see, judge, act. always in humility, always in solidarity, and always in community. May it be so.